Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. Welcome to a new video of 4.2 where in this video we will learn about the bond polarity and the dipole moment. Besides that, we will deduce the polarity of the molecule based on the shape and the resultant dipole moment. Okay, so based on the name of our subtopic itself, it's actually molecular shape and polarity. So polarity ni, inilah yang deduce the polarity of the molecule. It's actually heavily based on the shape and the resultant dipole moment. Okay, so before we go into learn about resultant dipole moment, we will learn first what is actually bond polarity and the dipole moment. So on your notes, it will be on page 16. Okay, so first mention about learn what is bond polarity. So here. Okay. Bond polarity is the differences in electronegativity between two atoms in a covalent bond. So, bond polarity ni there are two types. Non-polar bond and polar bond. Okay, so polar bond ni, a non-polar bond is actually the atoms have the same electronegativity. So, actually, when you learn about atom from our lithium until the last one, ingatlah apa Contohnya, element in period 2 itself. From lithium until our neon. Actually, it has its own electronegativity value. But then we do not have to learn that part lah. Okay. So, dekat sini, for non-polar bond, the atoms have the same electronegativity. Nak katanya sebenarnya, just to simplify it for you, non-polar bond ni is actually when the bond have the same atom. Okay. When the bond itself, contohnya ada have the same atom. So, it has the same electronegativity lah. So, for example, if we're talking about bond between lithium-lithium lah, for example. So, maknanya, they have the same electronegativity sebab it is the same atom where the sharing of electrons are equal. Okay, for the case of polar bond, here the atoms have different electronegativity. So, dekat sini, we will have different atom lah. Okay, where the sharing of electrons are not equal. Okay, why? Because electron are attracted to more electronegative atom, attracted to a higher electronegative atom. Okay, so what is actually electronegativity? This is actually what we have learned in chapter 3, the last part before we learn about our oxide tu. So, what is actually electronegativity? Is the ability of atom to attract electron. Okay, so for example, kat sini dia bagi tahu patterns of electronegativity. The most electronegative element is actually fluorine, and it's always increased towards fluorine in the periodic table. So, for example, in the same period, kat sini yang ni Miss I believe I always write it down kan, especially bila kita nak buat Lewis structure tu kan, nak tahu central tu dia CNOF. Nampak kan ni? Carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine. So, this is actually increasing electronegativity. So, this is actually yang ni I'm drawing for the period 2. So, contohnya, fluorine itself is a halogen where it is group 17. So, kalau group 17 ni, okay, we have fluorine, we have chlorine, we have bromine, we have iodine. Okay. So, this is actually, as we know, the electronegativity increase towards fluorine. Okay. So, contohnya dekat sini, electronegativity is the ability of atom to attract electron itself. So, contohnya dekat sini, when the atoms have different electronegativity, so electron tu akan attracted to more electronegative lah. Sebab electronegative tu mean easier to attract electron to itself, to achieve octets. Okay. Yang itu nanti kita akan tengok lagi. But before that, let's look. Classify the following bond into polar or non-polar bond. Okay, polar dan polar bond ni, paling penting tahu dia same atom ke different atom je. Electronegativity tu kita tengok lain nanti. Okay, so kita tengok. It's between carbon dengan nitrogen. Is it the same atom ke different? Sebenarnya dia different atom kan. So, it is actually our polar bond. Here. Nitrogen dengan nitrogen. Is it the same atom ataupun different atom? So, it is actually the same atom. Nitrogen dengan nitrogen. So, it is actually non-polar bond. So, nanti Miss akan add lagi soalan dalam Google Form. Bukan ini sahaja, Miss akan add lagi certain question lah. But it's quite straightforward. Bunyi ayam ni. Macam tu jadi. Okay. So, that is actually for the bond polarity. Okay, next is actually we're going to talk about dipole moment. Learning awal kita ada belajar dipole moment kan. Tapi ini we do not have to do lots of calculation. Just I'm going to explain it a bit sahaja. Okay, dipole moment is the product of the magnitude of the charge, Q ni, and the distance that separates the center of the positive and negative charge, which is our R. Okay, again, calculation is not required, but then you should know that mu, when it is not equal to 0, the molecule is polar. The mu is equal to 0, the molecule is non-polar. Okay, so apa yang polar dan polar ni, Miss? Tadi kita hanya tahu polar bond dan polar bond sahaja. So right now we're going to talk about yang kita punya R2 itself lah. Okay, so our arrow ni. Okay, so dia kata dekat sini, the direction of polarity of a polar bond. Sebab itulah, before you know the dipole moment, kena tahu dia polar ke non-polar. Okay, so for a polar bond, actually, the direction ni can be represented by shift in electron density towards more electronegative atom. Okay, for example here, what I have is that between my hydrogen fluoride. Okay, ni nak nampak juga pattern electronegative ni. Okay, it's between my hydrogen fluoride. So, for the hydrogen fluoride ni, dia memang, it's a covalent bond kan, dia share the electron. Okay, so what happened here? So, sebenarnya, fluorine is electronegative element. The highest kan, electronegative ni. So, what it means that, maknanya electron ni sebenarnya is more concentrated towards fluorine lagi. Fluorine ni memang nak ability to attract electron tu is high. So, sebab tu lah kita ada partial negative ni. Partial negative ni just to show that electron tu suka dekat dia. Kan negative ni means our electron lah. Okay, so we have to show it in the direction for our dipole tu. Macam kita nak buat dipole moment kita ni. So kita kena buat lah kita punya arrow. We have our arrow here towards fluorine. Sebab fluorine ni yang electronegative. Okay, and then we must have our tail juga pun kena ada lah. Maknanya electron ni is moving from my hydrogen tu to my fluorine. Macam tu. So, for this case, it's important for you to know yang the pattern of electronegativity. So, for example, what we have here, between my carbon and nitrogen. So, between my carbon dengan nitrogen, which one yang lagi high electronegativity? So, carbon dengan nitrogen dekat sini kan? Kita nampak nitrogen is higher. So, how we gonna draw it? Buatlah arrow towards nitrogen. Oops. Buatlah arrow towards nitrogen. Okay, and then make sure yang electronegative ni, nitrogen kita ni yang kita buat kita punya head. Okay, tail ni kita akan guna yang we will use yang less electronegative element. So macam ni, carbon, nitrogen. Lepas tu, next we're going to look at for example B. So kita tengok semua ni sebenarnya this is all the example of polar bond. Kenapa Miss cakap dia polar bond? Sebab different atom. Sebab semua ni dia ada different, ke sini lah, different atom. So, dia polar bond lah. Okay, so sulfur. Sulfur tu sebenarnya kat mana? Sulfur tu sebenarnya dia adalah group 16 tapi period 3. It's before my chlorine lah. Before my chlorine. Okay, so senang sebenarnya tengok dekat sini. So, between sulfur dengan oksigen, okay, sebenarnya oksigen ni lah more electronegative. So, buatlah arrow towards oksigen. Lepas tu, buatlah dia punya head to tail dia towards my carbon. Okay, polarity. So, kita nak cakap, this is actually dipole moment. Pole tu kan, pole tu could be pole positive, pole negative. Di tu maksudnya ada dua pole lah. Ada positif, negatif. Up to you nak buat yang charge partial positif, partial negatif boleh. Just the arrow pun is fine. Sebab it is understood when you're talking about the arrow itself. It's actually about our dipole kita lah. Partial positive, partial negative. Okay, so fluorine and oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, carbon and chlorine ni, I believe you could try yourself. Later I'm going to make more example lah. Nanti Miss akan buat the question itself. Indicate bond towards which atom. Yang which atom dia akan it will be the head. Remember, the head tu must be towards more electronegative. Maknanya dekat situ yang elektron suka pergi dekat dia lagi. So that is actually introduction of dipole moment. Okay, next what we're going to look at is actually the resultant dipole moment. Okay. So, contohnya dekat sini. For the resultant dipole moment, okay, draw resultant dipole moment for each of the following. So, yang A ni, actually we have different, we have different, we assume this is the same magnitude, tapi different direction. So, bila dia different direction, it is cancel out. So, yang ini kita akan katakan lah, is that for A ni, is that our mu is equal to 0. Sebab it cancel out each other. Okay. Kalau example A tu kan. So, sebenarnya, the one here dengan the one dekat bottom ni is the same one. So, here is actually mu equal to 0. Even though kamu nampak yang ini macam gabung macam means it's not. Sebab dekat opposite direction. Contohnya kalau means buat dia jadi dekat sini, kan jadi 0 juga kan. So, here pun sama juga. Mu is equal to 0. Okay. So, contohnya kalau yang ni, example B ni is, contoh kalau miss buat, if I have these two dipole moment, so the resultant dipole moment means akan dapat jadi, my resultant dipole moment will be this one. Sebab it's actually in the same direction kan, bukan the opposite direction. So yang ni, it will not be cancelled out. So yang ni, mu ni is not equal to 0. Okay. So contohnya example C ni. Okay, satu kita ada y-axis upward dengan x-axis to your right. So what is the resultant dipole moment? Sebenarnya resultant dipole moment kita dekat sini. So this will be our resultant dipole moment. So it actually will not be equal to 0. Okay. Okay. So that is actually only the introduction of polarity. So for the introduction of polarity, first nak tahu is actually either it is actually polar ke? Is it polar or non-polar bond? Okay. Again, make sure tahu the same ke different atom. Okay. Once we know that it is polar bond, you have to know what is the dipole moment. That the arrow, the head of the arrow will be towards the more electronegative atom. Okay, yang more electronegative ni yang kita akan buat dia jadi delta negatif. Okay, so the tail will be the more electropositive atom. Okay, nanti once, yang ini sebab when we're talking about molecule, mana ada satu bond je kan. Contohnya kalau kita ada CH4. CH4 kita pun, kat mana maksud tu kat tengah-tengah alam ni. CH4 itself ni, so macam mana kita nak tahu the resultant dipole moment tu? So later we're gonna learn it in the next video.